Buenos dias, good morning. Welcome to everyone tuning in to our Cafecito con ACE. My name is Patricia Mota and currently serving as President and CEO for the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, a national nonprofit whose mission is to positively impact the workplace by cultivating the pipeline of Latino talent and providing them the insight, access, and professional development to be successful in their careers. I hope you are hanging in there, staying positive, and focusing on what you can control. Get ready to engage with us today, ask questions, share, like, comments as we engage with our guests today. Talita Erickson Ramos, bienvenida. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Awesome. So Talita is the General Counsel of the Americas and CEO for Casa Barilla restaurants. So Barilla, the pasta that we all love and enjoy in our homes. Talita is a leader over there at that company. And so Talita, our first question usually is about our cafecito, or I have to say your preferred morning beverage of choice.
I know. Thank you. Well, it's coffee. I know we'll get to that a little later, but being from Brazil, we drink a lot of coffee. And when I moved to the US, there was always like these funny situations around coffee. Like when somebody told me about how, oh my gosh, my teenage daughter ended up having a cup of coffee by mistake at Starbucks. And I was like, well, she's a teenager. I was like, I've been drinking black coffee since I was 12. I had no idea that it was a big deal. And or even when I first moved here, my first order at Starbucks was 6 shots of espresso. And the barista was staring at me, and I was just like, I just can't
Did
do
you
with a
say
weak
six?
coffee.
6 shots?
Because I was having headaches because I'm so used to
So
Brazilian coffee,
withdraw.
which is very strong, and I was just like, I just need some coffee. Now I'm more used to Americano coffee, so it's a little easier. But yeah, my first order, the barista was like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, 6 shots."
That's hilarious. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to taste some coffee in Brazil, and I would say it's very strong. And but yeah. So Dalita, you also and just to give everyone some background on you, you serve as one of our national board of directors for ASET as well, and has been so supportive and helpful in so many ways. And also, you are, and I want to mention because Barilla and is being recognized as our 2021, one of our 2021 corporate champions of the year for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But share more about your background and both cultural and your professional experience.
Yeah, thank you. And you know that I always like to introduce myself using this methodology called RICH. So you talk about your race, your identity, your culture, and your heritage. So obviously, I'm very white, which in the Latinx community sometimes it's a fun or interesting conversation topic. Um, I'm originally from Brazil, so my heritage is Brazilian, and I immigrated to the U.S. back in 2004. I was working for Kraft, and I was relocated to the U.S. And moving to the US, I felt that the way I identify myself culturally now is a member of the Latinx community in the US. When I'm abroad, it's funny. If I'm in Europe and I'm talking to some of my European colleagues, I often tell I'm Brazilian. But if I'm in the US, I usually say I'm a Latina or I'm Latinx because that is kind of like the community that embraced me once I moved here. And in terms of identity, there's a lot of things that I think my point of view is influenced by. The one is my profession. I joke with people that I all the time I'll say, well, the lawyer in me says, or the lawyer in me thinks, and I can't avoid not thinking like a lawyer. So being a lawyer is a big part of my identity. Being an immigrant is a big part of my identity. Being a mom, and not just a mom, I'm a working mom and I'm a pet mom. So I have like a lot of things that are a big part of my identity in those elements as well.
Thank you for sharing, and I love that because that's something that ASID does a lot is ensuring that we're showcasing and embracing the identity that we each represent, right? And you shared perfect examples of what that is with your own story. And Talita, so we're celebrating Women's History Month, and one of the things that we got to at ASE pilot with Barilla and also with Edelman this year was our first ever multicultural leadership program. Where we had employees from both Barilla and Edelman participate in that and really focus on the Latinx, Black, and Asian, those that identified as those, right, to participate in this cohort. With that being said, why is it critical in your opinion that either corporate America or employers in general are providing culturally relevant leadership training or opportunities for their employees to engage with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love the pilot. I think it's a culturally sensitive leadership training is much needed. When I started my career back in Brazil, I shared this story many times too. I was in a young leadership development program at Kraft, and at that time, the leadership development that the model that was used was all about how do we can put you in a mold of what a craft leader behaves like. And it was a lot about not showing emotion, a lot about, they had all these sessions where they would basically criticize your work relentlessly until you broke down. And because the point was like, we want you to do this in a safe environment, because when you're out there in the real world, you're going to have to be tough and you can't show emotion. And I think like, and it was so odd. And I remember being in these sessions and just thinking like, what is this? Because I think if you have to do that to succeed, it may not be the right place for you if you have to kind of pretend to be somebody you're not, or pretend to hide things that are important to you. And I think today when I look at it, and obviously Kraft evolved as well. I know they have evolved in the way they're developing leaders too. And I think now it's all about authenticity and helping people figure out who they are and getting comfortable in their own skin. And because organizations, it's kind of like a push and pull. If you want to change organizations for them to become more diverse and more inclusive, you need the leaders in the organization to be working on representation, to be working on systemic barriers for advancement of people who are different from the majority. So there's a lot of things organizations have to do. But then the people who are not leaders yet, who are managers, who are individual contributors, they need to get comfortable in their own skin, and they need to become change agents as well. So I think having these programs that empower them to fully behave like they want to behave, understanding the nuances and the consequences of some of their of how they communicate or their style, it's empowering. You understand that sometimes you may make choices and that will come with consequences, and you embrace it and you manage it. And again, I think it's extremely relevant in these days.
Yeah, especially these days, right? So, being able to understand your values and what what's important to you is critical, because it helps you become that authentic leader, right? That these organizations all organizations need, and are so critical these days. So those of you tuning in, if you have any questions, comments, please start getting ready to share those. I want to make sure that we're leveraging this short amount of time that we have with Talita to get her insight. I mean, she also was formerly served as the Chief Diversity Officer for Barilla as well. And that's why, I mean, even before that, she has so many key insights on best practices and being able to build inclusive organizations. So Talita, we talked about, ASE's theme this year being We Lead at the Intersection of Identity, which we've talked about the equity piece, which is what are not only employers, organizations doing internally in terms of structures, processes, but also from the individual perspective. How are you self-advocating? How are you ensuring that you're pushing for that equitable space or resources that you need? And being part of programs, whether it's through ASE or other, maybe an organization or something part of the LGBTQ or in the Black community, because it's through those programs that you can see yourself represented, whether it's in leadership roles, but also be able to have those cultural conversations as well. And then the unity piece, which I'll ask you to speak on, being around allyship, right? How are we, I always say ASA is a Latino serving organization, but definitely not Latino exclusive or Latinx exclusive, right?
Yeah.
We welcome all to be able to participate, but it's also our responsibility that we're including everyone so that we're all learning together, right? So can you speak a little bit about to your perspective on the importance of allyship and a tip for whether it's an ERG group or an individual?
Absolutely. And I think, we've been trying to do a lot of work around identity. And because when you understand your identity, all these elements of identity become relevant to you
Mm-hmm.
too. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for us, it's about, it doesn't matter if you are a white, male, Caucasian, American. Those are elements of your identity. And you need to recognize that being white is part of your identity and understand that race should matter to you as well, and that you need to understand how race, plays into how you interact with people or what
Mm-hmm.
kind of advantages or disadvantages you have in life. So there's a number of things, just getting people used to introducing themselves, making these elements of identity very clear, very articulated. And that is the first step on building allyships, because once people understand that race is about everyone, it's not just
Mm-hmm.
about people who are being oppressed, or that gender is about everyone, not just about women. And then you start building this awareness, and it's easier to move on to a conversation about what those different elements of identity, what do they mean? Because we always say, privilege is invisible to those who have it. So until you understand your identity and how some elements of your identity may give you power, it's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult to move the discussion from what you believe is right or what you believe is respectful to what's society or what is systemic, what is institutional, and that you may be part of an unfair system if you're not, even if you're not intentionally contributing to the unfairness. So, and that links, I think, the identity to equity. So understanding that diversity, it's not equity. That treating people the same does not necessarily lead to equal outcomes or to equal opportunity. So understanding that people, and I used to quote this a lot when I was doing D&I work, talking about, everybody thinks that about the golden rule, like, oh, we need to treat people how I want to be
Mm-hmm.
treated. But that is a little lazy, because that means that I only care about how I see things. And as long as I'm okay with that treatment, everybody should be okay. And that is not okay. As a
Yeah.
leader, you need to understand how people want to be treated, and that requires work. You
Yeah.
really need to study, you need to engage to understand how other people may have unique needs, how the needs of minorities in your workplace, in your community, in your friends, in your family, and you try to treat them how they want to be treated. So again, it requires work. And the last piece, which I think is unit, which is very hard, is how do you navigate the differences respectfully, which is also
Mm-hmm.
a big element of inclusion. And it's hard, especially in the US with things being so polarized.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you need to find the boundaries in which you can engage in conversations, knowing that if somebody's opinion means that you're being disparaged or offended or something, that sometimes it's okay to not engage, but finding how to not completely say I just don't want to have those conversations, but how to have those conversations in a way that is constructive, because it's very difficult to agree to disagree these days. And again, I think the polarization is not improving at this point, but yeah, hopefully we'll get to a better place.
Yeah, no, great point. So privilege is not visible, is invisible to those that have it. I think that's powerful, and you have to meet people where they are, right? In terms of treating them how they want to be treated, now how you prefer to be treated, right? So, and that does take a lot of work to be able to do that. But it starts with you, right? And I always say this as we build out our leadership training programs or capabilities, it's always the number one step is that self-awareness piece, and the identity piece is critical. Understanding your strengths, your capabilities, your past, your blind spots, and the more that we are aware of ourselves, then we start becoming aware of where others may be and being able to adapt to them to be effective,
Yeah.
whether it's the way we communicate, the way we engage them, the way that we influence not only others but within organizations, right? And so
Yeah.
you've been a part of our programs at ASA, whether it's coming in as a speaker and engaging and sharing your insights. And so we appreciate you sharing that today as well. So those of you tuning in, I think we're a little shy today. If you have any questions, feel free. We have a short amount of time before we wrap up here. But Talita has been so gracious enough to join us. Talita, since I do have, and we've been talking about this topic around identity, anything else you would add or encourage for those that are struggling? Because I think sometimes it is a process. It evolves over time, right? Depending on where we are in our lives and situation. But you shared it, right? Like when you came to the US and then you're like, okay, and in Europe it's something different, What any tips for someone that's looking to become more self-aware in that piece?
Yeah, I would say you need to be intentional. So I
Mm-hmm.
think and be comfortable making mistakes. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
made many mistakes. I had the one of my employees, for example, he's Jewish, and I schedule a meeting on a really big Jewish holiday because I forgot to check on a multicultural calendar before I schedule a meeting. But he felt comfortable coming back to me and saying, "Hey, it's okay, go on with this meeting. I can join because it's a holiday." And
Mm-hmm.
my response was, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. No, you're going to be in the meeting and we're going to move the meeting. It was my mistake." So you don't
Yeah.
exclude people because you made a mistake, or even if they're trying to accommodate your ignorance, because it was my ignorance. So I've learned something from that experience, and now I'm much more careful about that. And I think getting, again, be okay making mistakes and study, read, follow things that are not in your comfort zone. So, watch movies about people who are different than you. There's all these stories out there that are about people's experiences, and just trying to understand their experiences and how they're different from yours. There's so much, resources. We live in a wonderful time that everything is, a
Yeah.
click away. There's a lot of things that you can learn and to do a better job in managing some of these things.
Great tips. So we have one question that we'll have time to answer from Erica. Thank you. How do I let a supervisor know that their comments may come across as dismissive or are coming across as dismissive? They don't really have the self-awareness or their opinion of themselves that they're sensitive. Is that they're sensitive?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I think a lot of times it's kind of like marriage counseling. You know how they say you have to use when you do that, you make me feel. So you don't try to say like it's a fact, like you are
Mm-hmm.
dismissive or you were dismissive. I think sometimes is about, if you have the kind of relationship with your supervisor, when you can say, I want to give you feedback. And it depends a lot, again, on the corporate culture, because sometimes if you're in a very hierarchical place, you may not have the opportunity to give feedback. But I think if you want to work with your supervisor, you can say, I want to give you feedback. I hope you're open to it. And I'm doing this to try, to help you to understand a different point of view. And then you go to when you do this or when you say this, it makes me feel this way. And a lot of times they're going to try to be defensive, and they're going to say, that's not what I meant. This is what I said. But it's very hard to argue with how something makes you feel,
Mm-hmm.
because you can say, I understand it was not your intention. I understand that you're not, dismissive, but I'm just saying that's how it makes me feel. And if this is a blind spot for you, there may be others. And always, again, encourage people to learn more, offer to help. I think people, human beings in general, when you ask them for help or when you offer help, that
Mm-hmm.
is always what better received than other circumstances. But to be very clear, if your supervisor is doing or saying something that is beyond this, that it could be offensive, hurtful, and you don't feel like you can have a conversation with your supervisor, you need to escalate. You need to go to HR. You need to go to the lawyer in the company. You need to figure out a way, because organizations cannot address issues if they don't know they're happening.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't let one manager ruin a good corporate culture. So just highly encourage people to
Excellent.
report.
Excellent tips, and thank you for the question, Erica, and thank you, Talita, for that. One last question for us to wrap it up. What are you most hopeful for this year?
What I'm I'm more what? Sorry?
Most hopeful for?
Oh, what I'm most hopeful for this year. Oh my gosh. When I introduced myself talking about my identity, I forgot one word, which is foodie. And Patricia knows, like, going to restaurants, I think, culinary, it's an art. I love seeing chefs who can
Can't wait
make,
to have dinner and lunch with
amazing
you
things.
again, Talita.
I know. So I am dying to go out and have a nice meal in a nice restaurant and experience, the artistic power of chefs. I miss that. It is probably one of the things I miss the most. And I try to do, like, the meal kits and a lot of other things, but definitely what I'm most hopeful for is being able to experience dining out again. And obviously visiting my family. My family is in Brazil, which is not the easiest place right now. And I really hope that things get under control so I can see them again.
There you have it, family and food. Right? I look
Very
forward to
Italian.
seeing you soon in person, Talita. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Hasta la próxima. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.